After Grandma left with her bodyguards, I was left all alone in the deathly pale hospital corridor. My newborn baby in my arms had woken up without me noticing. Her tiny lips pursed softly, and her small hands clutched frayed fabric of my worn hoodie tight. The bitter late autumn wind streamed through the window at the end of the hallway, and the incision from my C-section throbbed constantly. I leaned against the icy wall, my whole body trembling. Not a single crumpled dollar bill lingered in my pocket. My baby was hungry, yet I could not even afford a bottle of warm milk for her. Then they arrived. 2 lawyers in tailored suits approached, the click of their leather shoes on the tile floor sounding like funeral bells. Their faces blank, they handed a thick stack of court summons to me. The paper felt cold, every word sharp as a blade. The Stewart family was suing me for maliciously defaming the family's reputation. They also filed to strip my child of all inheritance rights and demanded I pay a staggering sum in compensation for emotional distress. The lawyer recited Grandma's words in the flat tone of someone reading an irrelevant memo. Miss Cecilia Stewart stated that she once promised you a monthly allowance of $300,000 to settle you down. You refused to cooperate, yet you publicly claimed you never received a cent, deliberately staging a miserable scene to win public sympathy and tarnish the Stewart family name. $300,000 a month. I stared down at the summons, my fingertips blue with cold. This was a monstrous lie woven entirely by Grandma. Years ago, I had rejected the arranged business marriage she'd forced on me and insisted on parting with the man I loved. Enraged, she spread rumors that she'd been sending me enormous sums every month. The whole world called me greedy and ungrateful, yet my bank accounts were spotless, not a single transfer from the Stewarts, not even a penny. My baby let out a soft whimper, and I hurried to pat her to soothe her. The harsh fluorescent lights of the corridor blazed down on me, leaving nowhere to hide. I gritted my teeth, the last flicker of softness fading from my eyes, replaced by a burning hatred rising from the marrow of my bones. If she was willing to use the law to drive me to ruin, I no longer needed to cling to the thin thread of our grandmother-granddaughter bond. Cecilia Stewart, every debt you owe me will be repaid, one by one. When the nurse came for the 3rd time to press me for the hospital bill, I could not scrape together enough money to stay even one more night. I had no choice but to hold my 3-day-old baby wrapped in my tattered hoodie and check out alone. The late autumn wind cut into my face like shards of glass. I owned no house, no savings, no family. I wandered aimlessly through the streets, the weight of my infant aching my arms, yet I could not afford a taxi ride. Strangers shot me strange glances, some whispered among themselves, others pinched their noses and walked wide around me, a ragged, disheveled young woman wandering the streets with a newborn, met only with scorn in this city. I was on the verge of collapsing onto the sidewalk when my phone rang. It was Josie, my only best friend from school. She had seen the coded post I'd set to visible only to her on my social media. She raced over in her car, and when she rolled down the window, I saw her bloodshot eyes and white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. She said nothing, only threw open the car door, hauled me and the baby into the warm vehicle, and pulled me into a crushing hug. Her shoulders shook, her voice trembling. "Claire, how did you let yourself end up like this?" Back at her cramped apartment, Josie made formula for the baby and watched me wolf down a bowl of hot noodle soup before she spoke through clenched teeth. "She never sent you a single cent of that $300,000 they promised." I held my sleeping baby, my throat raw as sandpaper. "Not once." Josie shot to her feet, pacing back and forth across the living room, her fists clenched until her knuckles whitened. "That old woman played the part of the charitable elder for 5 whole years behind closed doors, leaving you pregnant and suffering alone, and now she's suing you. Does she have any humanity at all?" I told her the full story, bit by bit. Aaron, my baby's father, and I had loved each other, but Grandma had torn us apart to secure a business partnership, forcing me to marry a middle-aged corporate partner. When I refused, she spread the lie of the monthly $300,000 stipend, froze every possible channel of money to me, and twisted the truth to paint me as a greedy, ungrateful ingrate to everyone. Josie grabbed my hand, her eyes glistening with tears. "Claire, I'm with you through this. I know a reliable lawyer. We'll gather evidence and tear her lies to shreds in court." The next morning, Josie accompanied me to every bank in the city to print 5 years of full bank statements. The dense records showed only meager earnings from odd jobs, tutoring, waiting tables, stocking supermarket shelves, each month's figure pitifully small, with zero incoming funds from the Stewart family. I thought these bank slips would be ironclad proof, but our lawyer shook his head gravely after reviewing them. "Bank records only prove you never received money. They cannot prove Cecilia Stewart ever promised the monthly $300,000. She can simply deny the promise in court and counter that you fabricated it out of thin air." He pushed the statements back across the desk. "We need witnesses, recordings of her promises, or written notes." My stomach dropped to my feet. Grandma had sent all servants away whenever she spoke to me, leaving only the two of us in her study. No third parties, no recordings, no written memos. I rummaged through my worn suitcase back home, finding nothing but yellowed old clothes, not a scrap of paper to back my word. Josie refused to give up, a thought suddenly striking her. "Martha, the elderly maid who looked after you back at the Stewart Manor, was there when Grandma drove you away. She might testify for us." We clung to this last shred of hope and drove to the neighborhood near the manor to ask around, only to learn Martha had been fired by the Stewarts 3 years prior, cut off entirely from all contact. No one knew where she'd gone. As the sun sank low, I stood in the empty alley and suddenly understood. Grandma had anticipated I would hunt for evidence. She'd eliminated every witness in advance, erased every trace, plotting every step to leave me without a single way forward. At that moment, the wind pierced straight through my bones. That evening, a knock sounded at the apartment door. The woman standing outside sent a chill racing down my spine. Melanie, my cousin, Grandma's favorite granddaughter. Since childhood, she had always taken my place to enjoy every privilege the Stewart family offered, playing the gentle angel in front of Grandma while smearing my name behind my back time and time again. She carried expensive baby supplies, her face stretched into a harmless, soft smile, reaching out to hold my child the second she stepped inside. "Cousin, Grandma only sent the lawyers out of momentary anger. Don't hold it against her. If you publicly admit you squandered the monthly $300,000, Grandma will drop the lawsuit at once and arrange a large house and full-time nannies for you." I stepped backward, clutching my baby tight, staring at her coldly. "I never received a single dollar. What am I supposed to admit to?" Melanie's smile faltered for a split second before smoothing back into gentle warmth. "Cousin, why be so stubborn? The Stewart family's legal team is second to none. How can a single mother possibly fight against a top-tier wealthy clan? Let their legal team come then." I locked eyes with her unflinchingly. "I'll meet them in court." The kindness in her gaze finally cracked, a flash of vicious malice glinting through. "You insist on burning all bridges. If you lose the lawsuit, you'll walk away with zero compensation, and your child will never touch a single Stewart asset for the rest of their life." I wasted no more words on her, shoving her out the door. The second it clicked shut, I heard her cold laugh from the hallway, followed by the fading tap of her high heels. Josie stepped out from the bedroom, her face ashen. "She'll run straight back and twist everything to Grandma, and the old woman will target us even harder." I stared down at my sleeping baby, my fingers white as I gripped the doorframe. Let her try. Early the next morning, a man I knew yet barely recognized stood beneath our apartment building. Aaron, my baby's father. He wore a perfectly tailored custom suit, tall and poised, now a well-known entrepreneur. 5 years prior, Grandma had torn us apart, and he'd believed her lies that I'd left voluntarily after accepting the monthly $300,000 stipend. Heartbroken, he'd fled the country and not returned for half a decade. But when he saw me standing in the cold wind, cradling our infant in ragged clothes, all color drained from his face, he rushed to my side, his voice shaking. "Claire, this is our child. You've been alone all these years. Where's the $300,000 Grandma sent you every month?" I lifted my head to meet his gaze, my throat burning yet no tears fell. "I never received a single payment." I handed him the bank statements. "She lied to you, lied to everyone. She left me penniless through 10 months of pregnancy, forced me to give birth alone in a hospital, and now she's suing to strip our child of everything." Aaron flipped through the bank records, his face shifting from pale to livid, his jaw clenched so tight it looked ready to snap. He reached out to pull me into his arms, but I stepped back, jostling the baby, who let out a small whimper. Right then, Melanie burst onto the scene with a swarm of reporters, camera flashes bursting like a downpour. "So you've been secretly tangled up with Aaron this whole time and had his baby behind closed doors." Melanie raised her voice to a shrill pitch. "No wonder you refused to leave the Stewart family with your compensation." Camera lenses pressed inches from my face, endless vicious speculations crashing down over me. Aaron stepped sharply in front of me, shouting the reporters away, yet the flashes kept firing, and those distorted photos spread across the entire internet in a single second. The wind howled, leaving me shaking all over. I held my baby close, staring at the endless clicking cameras, and suddenly it felt as though the entire city was sneering at me. Overnight, I became public enemy number one online. The Stewart family poured millions into manipulating every mainstream marketing account, pushing a unified narrative non-stop. Claire grew greedy off the $300,000 monthly stipend yet remained unsatisfied, secretly clinging to the child's father to birth an illegitimate baby, scheming to seize the family fortune while staging a pitiful act to slander her elder. Every comment section cut like a knife. "This woman is repulsive. Ungrateful gold digger. Poor child, stuck with a mother like this." No one was willing to believe I had never received a cent. Back at the Stewart Manor, Grandma sat on a silk-draped sofa, sipping black tea as she watched the online public opinion unfold, a slow smile tugging at her lips. She turned to Melanie. "Once public opinion drags her name through the mud, even if she pulls out bank statements, no one will believe a word she says." Josie tried posting an article to clear my name, yet it was restricted and deleted less than 3 minutes after going live. Holding capital and media channels, the Stewarts could silence every voice that dared defend me with effortless ease. That night, the baby cried on and off with colic. I held her in my arms by the window, sitting from dusk until dawn. Every light in the city flickered out one by one, leaving only my window illuminated, cold as an empty tomb. Aaron kept watch downstairs all night. At 6 the next morning, he sent a message, "I've brought my PR team. I'll stand with you through this." I stared at the words on my screen, buried my face in my baby's swaddle, and wept silently for a long time. Drawing on all his personal connections, Aaron tracked Martha down to a remote old neighborhood in the neighboring city. She had aged drastically, her hair completely white, the wrinkles on her hands like dried riverbeds. But when she laid eyes on my infant, her clouded eyes flooded with tears. "Child, I'm so sorry." She gripped my hand, her voice trembling uncontrollably. "That day Grandma locked you in her study and swore she'd wire $300,000 to you each month. Yet she turned around and ordered the finance department to block every transfer to you, warning every family member never to lend you a penny. I refused to comply with her lies, so she fired me on the spot." She pulled a yellowed diary out from under her bed, every page filled with her handwritten records of that day's conversation, timelines, and details. She'd jotted it down secretly 6 years prior, terrified she would forget, and hidden it ever since. Martha's hands shook as she clutched the diary. I've spent years searching for you, but the Stewart family blocked every path. I thought I'd never live to see you come for the truth. I held the diary to my chest, tears streaming down my face. As we prepared to leave, Martha grabbed my wrist, her voice lowered to an urgent whisper. That old woman is ruthless, she'll stop at nothing to protect her fortune and reputation. You must be careful, she will never let you rest. The second we pulled out of the alley, 2 black sedans appeared in our rearview mirror, tailing us relentlessly. On a secluded stretch of road, the cars accelerated sharply, cutting us off completely. Several suited bodyguards stormed out, charging straight for our car doors, reaching to snatch the diary Martha had given me. Josie screamed, shielding the baby, while Aaron threw open his door and stood between the guards and me, facing them head-on. His personal security team rushed over from the second vehicle, both sides ready to clash. The lead bodyguard pulled out a written order from Cecilia Stewart, his tone icy. Hand over the diary, and Miss Cecilia will withdraw all lawsuits. Otherwise, don't blame us for being harsh. Aaron stood firm in front of me, his voice heavy as iron. If you want the evidence, you'll see it in court. If you ambush and attempt to seize documents in public, I'll call the police right now and have every single one of you arrested. The guards exchanged glances, realizing Aaron would not back down and had backup of his own. Reluctantly, they retreated to their cars and drove away. Back at the apartment, we copied the original diary a dozen times, storing copies with our lawyer, a bank safe deposit box, and Aaron's company headquarters. Josie's hand still shook as she held the baby, her heart pounding with fear. They're capable of anything. Aaron stepped in front of me, taking my cold hands in his. Dark circles lined his bloodshot eyes, yet his tone was steady and resolute. Claire, stay with me. I'll protect you and our baby. We will win this lawsuit. I glanced down at my sleeping infant, my fingers tightening around a copy of the diary. I nodded. 1 week before the court hearing, our lawyer delivered devastating news. Melanie had tracked down the private clinic where I'd received prenatal checkups and bribed the medical staff to falsify my pregnancy records. She leaked a story claiming the baby had been conceived during the period I was supposedly living off the Stewart stipend and squandering money recklessly. This tactic was vicious beyond measure. If the judge accepted the falsified records and ruled I'd already been receiving the $300,000 payments at the time of conception, I would be deemed to have intentionally gotten pregnant to seize the family fortune. Josie slammed a mug against the floor in rage. Melanie would forge medical records just to win. That's a criminal offense. Aaron rushed to the clinic overnight with his investigative team, yet all surveillance footage had been erased, and every medical employee stuck to the same fabricated story, refusing to admit they'd taken bribes. Every thread of evidence had been wiped clean, as if we'd never set foot in the clinic at all. That same night, the baby spiked a low fever. I held her awake through the dark hours, while Aaron sat beside the crib without leaving once, dabbing her forehead with cool cloths and rushing his investigative team to dig up more proof. I stared at my baby's flushed little face, tears dripping onto her tiny palm, yet I made no sound. To the Stewarts, any display of grief would only become another weapon to use against me. I bit my lip, swallowing every tear. Melanie, you've lost all sense to win this fight. But I will not let you prevail. The night before the trial, Grandma summoned me to the Stewart family's exclusive private club. Dressed in a custom haute couture gown with her silver hair perfectly coiffed, she leaned back elegantly against leather sofas, a settlement agreement spread open before her. She carried herself with unhurried poise, as if tossing a scrap of food to a stray cat. Sign this, take your child far away from this city, cut all contact with Aaron forever, and renounce every inheritance right for your baby. I will give you a one-time lump sum of $500,000. She lifted her coffee cup, her tone dripping with condescension. This is the last mercy I will extend to you. Compared to losing everything in court, taking the money and vanishing is the wisest choice you could make. 500,000. Compared to the supposed monthly 300,000 she claimed to send me, it was nothing more than a drop in the bucket. Even now, she refused to admit she'd never honored her promise, instead trying to buy out every right my child and I possessed with a single payout. I glanced at the cold printed agreement, then slowly lifted my head to meet her gaze directly. I don't want your money. All I want is the truth, for everyone in court to hear that the monthly 300,000 you promised was never paid to me, not once. Grandma's calm composure shattered instantly, replaced by a sheet of frigid rage. You refuse the gracious offer and choose to provoke me? Tomorrow in court, I will ruin your reputation completely. You and your child will never find a single safe corner in this city again. I lifted my baby into my arms, stood, and walked out of the opulent, frigid lounge without a single backward glance. Outside, the sunlight blazed harshly. Aaron waited for me on the stone steps, holding out his hand. I descended the steps and slipped my hand into his, glancing back at the sprawling manor behind us, a magnificent gilded prison. Tomorrow, I would carve a crack in its walls inside that courtroom. On the day of the trial, the sky hung dark and heavy, as if the end of the world loomed. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my palms slick with cold sweat as my lawyer sorted through stacks of paperwork. Josie held the baby in the last row of the gallery, while Aaron sat front row, his gaze never leaving me. At the defendant's table, Cecilia Stewart sat rigid and unshakable, draped in dark green velvet, her silver hair immaculate. She did not spare me a single glance, as if the day's trial was nothing more than a leisurely afternoon tea engagement. Melanie sat beside her, a polished smile fixed on her face, leaning in every few minutes to whisper into Grandma's ear, the perfect portrait of a devoted granddaughter. The judge took his seat, and the hearing began. The Stewart family's lawyer spoke first, his tone sharp and commanding. My client, Miss Cecilia Stewart, upheld her word for years, transferring $300,000 to Claire every month as living expenses. Yet Claire squandered the funds, fabricated the lie that she received nothing, and staged pitiful scenes on social media to garner public sympathy, severely damaging the Stewart family's reputation. We request the court to dismiss all her claims and hold her accountable for defamation. A stack of bank withdrawal slips was presented to the judge, records of Cecilia Stewart withdrawing $300,000 in cash every month for 5 years, each withdrawal matching the exact timeline of her alleged stipend. I shot upright in my seat. The withdrawal records were crystal clear, perfectly aligned with the supposed monthly payments. Yet I had never received a single dollar. There was only one explanation: Cecilia had withdrawn the cash, yet never delivered a cent to me. My lawyer countered immediately. Cash withdrawal records only prove Miss Stewart withdrew money, they cannot prove those funds reached Claire. We demand the Stewart family provide proof of deposits to Claire's accounts or signed receipts acknowledging receipt of the cash. The opposing lawyer responded unruffled. Miss Cecilia Stewart is advanced in years and has always handled monetary exchanges with family members in cash, never requiring signed receipts. A lack of deposits in Claire's accounts does not mean she never received the money. She could easily have deposited the cash into alternate accounts or spent it outright. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Josie clenched her fists, and the baby stirred restlessly in her arms. I closed my eyes. I had long anticipated this tactic, fabricating cash withdrawal records to create the illusion of regular payments, then hiding behind the lack of receipts to block my evidence. The ploy was vicious, and a judge could not reasonably rule solely based on empty bank accounts to disprove her claim. Your Honor, my lawyer rose to speak. The plaintiff calls our first witness, Margaret, formerly a long-serving maid of the Stewart household, present during the conversation between Miss Cecilia Stewart and Claire that year, able to testify that Cecilia never fulfilled her financial promise. The courtroom doors swung open, and white-haired Margaret stepped forward, clutching her yellowed diary tight in her hands. Cecilia Stewart's fingertips tapped lightly against the table for the first time. Margaret took the witness stand, her voice trembling. I remember every word you said to me that day. You told me you would send Claire $300,000 a month to send her away, then ordered the finance department not to transfer a single cent to her. I watched you give that order myself. The opposing lawyer cut her off at once. This is nothing more than the witness's uncorroborated testimony. The diary is self-written and inadmissible as legal evidence. Furthermore, the witness previously had an employment dispute with the Stewart family, giving her motive to retaliate with false accusations. Margaret's face flushed bright red. I am not retaliating. Every word I speak is the truth. The judge struck his gavel. The plaintiff must provide additional direct evidence to support their claims. I sat frozen at the plaintiff's table, my nails digging deep into my palms. All I possessed was a diary and a single witness. The Stewart family commanded an entire elite legal team, fabricated withdrawal records, erased surveillance footage and transfer trails. This battle had never been fair from the very start. The recess bell rang. My legs buckled as I stood, and Aaron rushed forward to steady me. He met my eyes, his voice steady. Don't fear. My team is digging up proof Melanie bribed the clinic staff. Give me a little more time. My throat felt raw. Aaron, what if we find nothing? He fell silent for a beat, squeezing my hand firmly. Then we find another way. I will not let her win. That night after court recess, Josie sent me to rest in the bedroom while she stood guard at the front door. She caught the faint scrape of a lockpick from the hallway, and a wave of terror washed over her. She sprinted into the bedroom and shook me awake. Someone's breaking in. Call Aaron now. I jolted awake, stuffed the sleeping baby into Josie's arms, grabbed a pepper spray canister, and dialed Aaron's number. The second the call connected, the bedroom door crashed inward, two masked men charging straight for the desk holding the diary copies. I threw myself in front of the table, spraying the pepper spray full in their faces. One man howled and stumbled backward, while the other lunged forward to snatch the documents. Josie scrambled to the corner with the baby, kicking wildly at the approaching intruder as the infant woke, screaming at the top of her lungs. I clung desperately to the diary pages, my nails tearing the man's skin, yet my body was still weak from childbirth, no match for his brute strength. With a sharp rip, half the diary copy was torn free from my grasp, clutched in his fist. Let's go. The two men fled with the torn pages. I collapsed to the floor, clutching the remaining half of the diary, my body shaking uncontrollably. By the time Aaron and his security team burst through the door, I could barely form coherent sentences, only pushing the surviving half of the pages toward him. They took half of it. Josie held the wailing baby, tears streaming down her own face, yet she forced a shaky comfort. We still have half, we still have proof left. Aaron's forehead bulged with veins of rage. He ordered the entire building's surveillance footage pulled overnight, only to receive the same answer: camera malfunction. Every recording had vanished without a trace. The two intruders vanished into the night like phantoms. Cecilia Stewart left no loose ends in her schemes. News of the stolen half-diary reached the Stewart household, and Melanie leaned back on the sofa painting her nails, scoffing coldly. She dares to fight Grandma with such flimsy evidence. Burn those pages and leave no trace. She had no idea the half-diary seized held far less critical information than she imagined. Margaret had a strange habit, copying every vital conversation twice, drafting rough notes on the left page and rewriting a clean final version on the right. Melanie had stolen only the rough left pages. The right-hand transcribed copies, which I'd stored separately, remained safe with our lawyer. The right pages are still intact. Aaron answered the lawyer's call while sitting beside our feverish baby in the hospital, his eyes lighting up instantly. Make 3 more copies immediately, and lock the original in a bank vault. No one touches them this time. He hung up and glanced over at me, asleep slumped in a chair beside the crib, heavy dark circles beneath my eyes, my hand still curled around the baby's blanket. Aaron draped his suit jacket gently over my shoulders, then sat down to re-examine the Stewart family's financial records. A hunch gnawed at him. Cecilia's monthly cash withdrawal amounts and timelines were unnaturally uniform, unlike regular personal spending. If she withdrew $300,000 every month, that massive sum had to circulate back into the Stewart corporate network somewhere, otherwise, her books would show an enormous unaccounted-for deficit. At 3 o'clock in the morning, his investigative team sent over a breakthrough file. Cecilia Stewart owned a tiny, obscure shell corporation registered the exact same year she claimed to begin sending the monthly stipend. For 5 years, 3 to 5 business days after each large cash withdrawal, an identical sum of money was deposited into the shell company's account under the label consulting service fees. The firm's registered legal representative was Melanie's college roommate. Aaron stared at the chain of financial connections spread across his screen, a slow, grim smile forming on his lips. Cecilia's trick was simple. She withdrew cash to create the false impression of regular payments, funneled the money back into her own holdings through the empty shell business under the guise of service fees, and sanitized the paper trail completely. If the consulting service contracts were proven fraudulent, the entire financial chain would collapse under scrutiny. Dawn streaked the sky pale pink when I woke up. Wrapped in Aaron's jacket, I saw his bloodshot eyes and whispered, "Did you find something?" He knelt down beside my chair, taking my icy hands in his. "We did. This time, we've caught her red-handed." Aaron's investigators traveled to the neighboring city overnight to locate Vivian, Melanie's college roommate. Vivian ran a tiny struggling consulting firm to scrape by. 5 years prior, Melanie had approached her to register the Shell Corporation, paying her $50,000 annually as a management fee, claiming it was merely internal family cash flow with no hidden strings. Short on money back then, Vivian had agreed without a second thought. But when Aaron's team laid out the full financial trail and spelled out the severe legal consequences for her, Vivian crumpled in her chair, her face drained of color. "I never knew they were laundering money." Melanie only said, "Will I go to jail if I testify in court?" Our lawyer spoke calmly. "If you cooperate by handing over all original contracts and signed paperwork, we can petition the court to grant you witness immunity with reduced sentencing. If you refuse, the full weight of the investigation will fall on you, and the consequences will be irreversible." Vivian took only one night to hand over every document, emails exchanged with Melanie, chat logs, 5 years of bank transaction records. One email contained unmistakable black and white text, $300,000 monthly, routed under consulting service fees, no actual services required to be rendered. The day after obtaining this evidence, Aaron brought the full file to me. I tore open the folder and flipped page after page, my fingers trembling. 5 years of lies, 5 years of unjust suffering, all condensed into these sheets of paper. Every dollar she withdrew ended up right back in her own pockets. I lifted my head to meet Aaron's gaze, my voice barely audible. She never intended to send me a single cent from the very beginning. It goes deeper than that. Aaron flipped to another page. This shell company was registered the year before she drove you out of the manor. Cecilia planned this all along. She needed a believable excuse to cast you aside permanently, then destroy your reputation with public lies. I clutched the stack of documents, falling silent for a long stretch of time. Outside the window, the sky finally cleared. 2 days later, court reconvened for a second hearing. This time, I stood tall at the plaintiff's table, a thick stack of evidence folders resting beside me. Aaron sat front row, Josie holding the baby beside him, Margaret seated in the back row with her hands folded, her lips moving in silent prayer. Cecilia Stewart entered the courtroom with her usual unshaken poise, Melanie's soft smile fixed on her face. She even nodded slightly in my direction, the gesture dripping with fake pity, like an elder humoring a foolish child. Your Honor, the plaintiff requests to submit new supplementary evidence, our lawyer rose, handing the documents to the judge. Records prove the defendant Cecilia Stewart routed every $300,000 cash withdrawal she claimed to pay Claire back into her own accounts via a third-party shell corporation under the label of consulting fees. The 5-year circular financial trail is fully documented, confirming zero actual disbursements to Claire. A murmur of shock rippled through the courtroom. Cecilia's legal team leapt to their feet to object, attempting to discredit the validity of our evidence, yet Aaron's legal team had built an airtight case, emails, chat logs, contract texts, and bank statements cross-referenced perfectly, every timeline matching without a single flaw for them to exploit. Cecilia Stewart's composure finally shattered. She shot a sharp, icy glare at Melanie beside her. Melanie's smile froze solid, her nails digging deep into the armrest of her chair, her lips pressed into a thin white line. She had calculated every angle, yet never anticipated her ordinary college roommate would become the fatal crack in her carefully constructed lies. During the recess, Cecilia Stewart paused beside me as she walked out, her voice cold. Enough to frost over. You think you've won? This small scrap of evidence is nowhere near enough to ruin me. I raised you all these years, and this is how you repay me, an ungrateful ingrate. I stood to face her, my voice quiet yet clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. You never raised me. From the day you drove me out of the Stewart Manor, all you gave me was a false accusation, a fabricated lie, and a court summons. Cecilia's eyes twitched, unable to retort, and stormed away. Melanie followed close behind, muttering a bitter threat under her breath, "Don't get cocky. We'll see who has the last laugh." I ignored her entirely. Aaron stepped to my side, gathering the folders in his hands, speaking softly. Let's go. We still have a long fight ahead of us. The night after her fake financial loop was exposed, Melanie unleashed a fresh smear campaign. Her PR team drafted a lengthy exposé under the guise of an anonymous insider, fabricating the true story behind my expulsion from the Stewart household. I had accumulated massive gambling debts during university, which Cecilia had paid off on my behalf, yet I continued to overspend and even embezzled funds from a minor Stewart family subsidiary. Out of familial mercy, Cecilia had chosen not to press criminal charges, instead sending me away with the $300,000 monthly stipend to rebuild my life. The article was crafted with fabricated specific dates, dollar amounts, and even fake creditor contact information, rendered far more convincing than the truth. Overnight, public opinion flipped once more, so she's a compulsive gambler after all. The old lady was endlessly kind to her. Poor Cecilia, wronged by this greedy girl. I stared at the flood of hateful comments on my phone, my body going numb. I had never gambled a day in my life. Yet the Stewarts' elaborate lies came complete with timelines and figures, far more persuasive than plain, unembellished truth to the public. They're determined to destroy me completely. I set my phone face down on the table, my fingers shaking. They cleared one false accusation, only to manufacture another immediately. Aaron's tone turned grave. This means they're desperate. They have no genuine evidence left to stand on, so they resort to outright fabrication. But the online crowd believes them. I closed my eyes heavily. Public sentiment could sway the judge's ruling. Aaron knelt down to meet my gaze, his eyes lined with exhaustion from days without full sleep. I won't let online chatter influence the court. I've hired a third-party professional auditing firm to conduct a full review of your credit history, bank records, and all financial activity dating back to college. Judges rule on tangible evidence, not social media trends. I opened my eyes to look at him, dark stubble coating his jaw from sleepless nights. Aaron, why do you go to all this trouble for me? Because I failed to protect you 5 years ago, he cut me off, his tone steady and heavy. I will not live with that regret a second time. The professional audit report took 5 full days to complete. It covered every personal bank account I'd held since university, full credit reports, and cross-checks against all gambling and illegal lending databases. The conclusion was a single concise line. Claire holds no records of gambling or unlawful debt, maintains a clean personal credit score, all income sources are clearly documented and legitimate, with 0 financial transactions linked to the Stewart family. Our lawyer printed dozens of copies, submitting one to the court, distributing one to every major media outlet, and posting a full copy on Aaron's corporate public platform. His legal team issued a stern formal notice: any marketing account or influencer continuing to spread the fabricated gambling slander would face immediate defamation lawsuits. Public sentiment finally shifted irrevocably. How deep does the Stewart family's hatred run to churn out lie after lie? She never received a cent, and the gambling claims are completely fake. They're trying to bury her alive. My heart breaks for that baby, stuck with such a cruel great-grandmother. My social media followers surged, and the comment sections filled with supportive messages for the first time. Josie scrolled through the posts, laughing and crying as she lifted the baby into her arms, pressing repeated kisses to her forehead. Claire, people finally know the truth about you. Back at the Stewart Manor, Melanie threw her phone onto the sofa in a rage. Grandma, we can't contain the backlash anymore, everyone online is attacking us. Cecilia Stewart sat at a garden tea table, twisting her teacup between her fingers, her eyes cold as frozen ice. Don't panic. Do you truly believe she's won? The court hasn't issued a verdict yet. Once I present that signed agreement tomorrow, the judge will see who truly holds the upper hand. Melanie frowned in confusion. What agreement? A faint cold smile touched Cecilia's lips. The 6-year-old voluntary waiver of Stewart family inheritance and future financial support document Claire signed when she left. As long as this paper exists, she and her child will never claim a single dollar from the Stewart estate. On the final day of the trial, the courtroom stood packed to capacity. Cecilia Stewart wore a black silk cheongsam, her silver hair sharp and unyielding, her expression carved with unrelenting severity. She shot me a single glance upon entering, looking at me as if I were discarded trash. Melanie sat beside her, her makeup flawless, a confident smirk playing on her lips. I sat at the plaintiff's table, the audit report and financial fraud evidence stacked beside me. Aaron occupied the front row of the gallery, a fresh stack of printed documents beside him, our full legal team in attendance. After the judge verified the audit report's authenticity, Cecilia's lawyer slowly pulled a yellowed document from his briefcase. Your Honor, the defense submits this critical evidence, the voluntary waiver of Stewart family property inheritance and future support rights signed by Claire 6 years prior. Claire formally relinquished all legal claims to the family's assets that year. Regardless of whether the alleged $300,000 monthly stipend existed, the plaintiff's legal claims hold no merit under this written agreement. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. My vision blurred. I had indeed signed that paper. It was the final day I left the Stewart Manor, and Cecilia had slid the single page across her desk to me. Sign this, and you sever all ties with the Stewart family forever. Heartbroken, penniless, and desperate to escape that suffocating household, I'd signed without reading the fine print, keeping no copy for myself. I'd believed it was merely a document cutting our family connection, unaware it contained the hidden trap of waiving all rights to financial support. Cecilia sipped water from her glass, moving with unhurried grace, certain she had secured her victory. Our lawyer countered at once. The waiver was signed under duress. Cecilia Stewart forced Claire to leave by threatening permanent estrangement. The terms are drastically one-sided and unfair, rendering the document legally void. The opposing lawyer refused to concede ground. Claire was 20 years old, a fully competent adult capable of executing legal paperwork. The agreement was signed voluntarily and remains legally binding. The judge scanned the yellowed waiver, turning to address me. Plaintiff, do you confirm this signature belongs to you? I rose slowly to my feet. It is my signature, I spoke clearly, every word deliberate. But this waiver was coerced by Cecilia Stewart, who threatened to cut all contact with me unless I signed. The entire conflict began when she forcibly separated Aaron and me, fabricating the $300,000 stipend lie, stripping me of all agency and information. Every step she took was a trap laid for me in advance. The judge's tone turned grave. Plaintiff, provide supplementary evidence proving the signing was done under duress. Our lawyer frantically flipped through our document bag, yet the waiver had been signed in complete privacy within the study, no surveillance footage, no witnesses present. Cecilia had erased every possible trail of evidence long before the lawsuit began. The trial hit an impasse once again. During the 20-minute recess, Aaron walked over from the gallery and slid an unopened folder across the table to me. This is our final piece of evidence. I'd hoped to hold it back, but her production of the waiver leaves us no choice. Claire, look at what happened immediately after you signed that document. I tore open the folder, revealing a bank transfer screenshot dated 3 days after I signed the waiver. $300,000 transferred directly from Cecilia Stewart's personal account to Melanie's name. Aaron flipped to the second page. The same month you signed the waiver, Cecilia had $300,000 available to disperse, yet she sent it to Melanie instead of you. My fingers trembled as I stared at the screenshot. When court reconvened, our lawyer submitted the transfer record as evidence. Cecilia's face drained of all color. She snapped her head toward Melanie, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass. Melanie stared at her lap, twisting her fingers together, unable to utter a word. That transfer had indeed taken place. Years ago, she'd casually mentioned wanting a new luxury car, and Cecilia had sent the $300,000 without hesitation. She'd never imagined the transaction would resurface years later as irrefutable proof of Cecilia's broken promises. Your Honor, our lawyer spoke loudly for the entire court to hear. The month Claire signed the waiver announcing all support, Cecilia Stewart transferred an identical sum of money to a third party. Her claim that she could not afford financial support or that Claire had voluntarily abandoned all aid directly contradicts the actual flow of her capital. We request the court to review the context of the waiver alongside this transfer record in their ruling. The Stewart legal team attempted to object, yet the timestamp and fully verified account details on the transfer slip left no room for dispute. The judge struck his gavel. Both sides have finished their statements. The court will issue a verdict at a later date. As we walked out of the courthouse, the setting sun dyed the stone steps deep crimson. Cecilia Stewart passed beside me, her pace slower than usual. Her silver hair stirred faintly in the evening wind. She did not glance my way, nor speak a word, climbing silently into her black sedan. Melanie followed close behind, her teeth gritted as she hissed under her breath. You win this round, but the waiver still stands. You'll never see a single dollar from the family. I turned to face her, my voice calm and steady. I never sought her money. All I wanted was for everyone to hear the truth about her lies and every debt she owes me. Melanie's face blanched, slamming the car door shut and driving away. Aaron stepped to my side, the light evening breeze brushing loose strands of my hair. He watched the retreating vehicles, speaking softly. No matter the final verdict, I will provide for you and our child for the rest of our lives. A faint smile tugged at my lips. I know. Josie came sprinting down the stone steps holding the baby. Claire. Sunny just smiled. I turned to see my infant daughter opening her toothless mouth in a giddy grin, her round cheeks flushed peach in the sunset glow, soft as a freshly peeled peach. I reached out to take her into my arms, pressing my forehead gently against her warm small one, closing my eyes for a moment. A faint hint of lingering warmth clung to the autumn wind. No matter what the judge would decide tomorrow, I now stood surrounded by people willing to walk every hard road beside me. The truth existed, justice waited, and my baby rested safe in my arms. The night before the verdict, I stayed awake until dawn. Sunny slept soundly, her tiny fist curled around the edge of her blanket, her breathing slow and steady. I sat beside the crib, reading the tattered remaining pages of Margaret's diary under dim lamplight, brushing my fingertips over her faded handwriting again and again. A soft car engine hummed outside the window, deliberately quieted to avoid drawing attention. My phone lit up with a text from Aaron, "Don't worry, it's only me." I pulled a light coat over my shoulders and headed downstairs. Aaron stood beneath the street lamp, his hair tousled by the night wind, his collar unbuttoned. He'd driven straight from his office without stopping home. Cecilia Stewart met with the lead judge's assistant privately this afternoon. He lowered his voice to a murmur. She claimed the meeting was for personal matters, yet the timing is far too suspicious. She would never risk outright bribery, but she may have planted false claims to paint you as emotionally unstable and mentally unfit, or submitted more fabricated documents. She does not need the judge to rule in her favor, she only needs to plant doubt in his mind. A surge of anxiety tightened my chest. I've instructed our lawyer to file an official court petition, requesting disclosure of the full details of that private meeting and confirmation that the presiding judge holds no conflicts of interest with the Stewart family. Aaron placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We have prepared countermeasures. My fear is not her underhanded tactics. I lifted my gaze to meet his bloodshot eyes. Heavy with exhaustion. Even if we win the lawsuit, she will find another way to destroy my child and me. She holds unlimited wealth and power, and she will never surrender. Aaron fell silent for a heartbeat. Then we leave her with no means to fight back at all. His gaze was unwavering. The Stewart family's collateral branches have been suppressed by Cecilia for over a decade, each holding evidence of her misdeeds, silenced only by fear of retaliation. Now, they finally have someone powerful enough to stand behind them. Dry sycamore leaves swirled across the pavement between us, rustling softly, like an unspoken promise sealed in the dark. Let's head inside. We have court tomorrow. I turned to walk back, glancing over my shoulder. He stood in place and smiled at me. Sleep well. He did not climb into his car until the light in my bedroom flickered back on. As he pulled open his vehicle door, his phone buzzed with a new message from a distant Stewart family cousin, "I will meet with you." The night deepened further. On the day of the verdict, the courtroom gallery was filled to capacity. As I walked in, I spotted several unfamiliar faces in the back rows, men and women aged 40 to 60, dressed plainly, their expressions tense. One woman gripped her handbag so tight her knuckles whitened, while a man beside her continuously wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. Aaron sat front row, nodding once to signal support as I passed. All rise. The court will now deliver its verdict. The judge's voice echoed through the silent room. Cecilia sat rigid and upright, her silver hair perfectly arranged, her expression almost arrogantly composed. Melanie maintained her polished smile, yet her fingers twisted nervously beneath the table. Regarding the defamation lawsuit brought by plaintiff Claire against defendant Cecilia Stewart, after thorough review of all evidence presented to the court, this tribunal confirms that Cecilia Stewart's public statements alleging monthly $300,000 stipend payments constitute false claims, with no supporting records of actual disbursements to Claire. The plaintiff endured sustained reputational harm without receiving any financial compensation from the defendant, and Cecilia Stewart shall bear full legal liability for defamation. Cecilia's fingertips twitched. Furthermore, the court notes the voluntary waiver document submitted by the defense was signed under unequal information and without adequate opportunity for negotiation. Combined with the records of the defendant's parallel fund transfers to third parties that same month, the waiver shall not be deemed fully legally enforceable. Melanie's complexion turned paper white. The court issues the following judgment: Defendant Cecilia Stewart shall immediately cease all defamatory conduct and issue a public formal apology to plaintiff Claire. The defendant shall compensate the plaintiff for emotional distress damages and all reasonable legal fees incurred, with the exact monetary amount to be finalized separately. The plaintiff's challenge to the full validity of the waiver document is partially upheld by this court. The judge struck his gavel. Court adjourned. Cecilia shot abruptly to her feet, her voice shrill and cracking like a frayed wire cutting through the silence. I reject this ruling completely. The judge has been misled by this woman. She signed the waiver. How can you order me to pay compensation? Bailiffs stepped forward to escort her out, yet she shrugged off their hands, jabbing a finger straight at me. Ungrateful ingrate. I raised you for years, and this is how you repay me. Do you think winning one trial will change anything? This is nothing but a hollow victory. I stood my ground without retreating. I am not chasing empty victory, my voice steady enough to surprise even myself. All I ever wanted was the truth. The debt you owe me was never financial. Cecilia froze mid-rant. A woman clutching her handbag stood up abruptly from the back gallery. Cecilia Stewart, do you remember me? Every head swiveled toward her. 40 years old, with a plain, unmade face and a faded black coat, her knuckles white around her bag strap, eyes glistening with rage. My name is Irene. I worked as your household maid for 5 years. You forced me to sign blank labor contracts, stole 7 years of my social security benefits, and threatened to blacklist me from every domestic job agency if I spoke a word. Today I came to watch you finally lose everything. A middle-aged man who'd been wiping sweat rose next. I drove your family's vehicles for 8 years. Your son caused a drunk driving crash, and you forced me to take the blame, threatening my entire family with my household registration papers to make me sign a false confession. I can finally speak the truth today. One after another, more witnesses stood. You embezzled my husband's workplace injury compensation. You drove my younger sister to the brink of suicide because she refused to forge accounting records for you. The factory owned by the Stewart family discharged unfiltered toxic waste, causing skin disease across an entire village. Each accusation landed like shattering ice, revealing decades of buried cruelty inflicted by Cecilia Stewart. She stood frozen at the defendant's table, her lips trembling, clutching the table edge until her knuckles blanched, unable to form a coherent sentence, only broken, gasping denials. Lies, all of you are lying. Melanie reached out to steady her, yet Cecilia roughly swatted her hand away. Bailiffs escorted both women out of the courtroom. As they passed the gallery, Melanie hid her face behind a folder, hurrying forward with stumbling, rushed steps. The crowd slowly dispersed. I stood beside the plaintiff's table, clutching the verdict paper, the ink warm beneath my fingers. Josie sprinted down the gallery steps with the baby in her arms, throwing her arms around me, laughing through her tears. "We won, Claire. We finally won." I stumbled backward from the force of her embrace, steadying her and the infant, a faint smile tugging at my lips as my eyes burned with held-back tears. I glanced down at Sunny, her dark round eyes wide open, her lips parted as she babbled soft, indistinct sounds, as if cheering for me. Aaron walked over, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder without a word. I lifted my gaze toward the tall courtroom windows, golden afternoon sunlight slanting through the glass, wrapping the three of us in warm, glowing light. I drew a deep breath, folded the verdict neatly and tucked it into my bag, lifting Sunny into my arms to press a soft kiss to her warm forehead. "Let's go home." That night following the verdict, the entire internet erupted in discussion. Aaron's PR team published a comprehensive long-form article compiling the verdict summary, footage of Cecilia's breakdown in court, and the witness testimonies from the gallery, posted simultaneously across every major social media platform. The headline read simply, "The $300,000 lie, the full story of Cecilia Stewart's 5-year deception." The post was shared over 1 million times within 3 hours, and public opinion shifted irrevocably. They slandered this woman for 5 years, yet she never received a single dollar. The old lady spent decades building a charitable persona, all a fabricated act. Cover-ups for hit-and-runs, stolen social security funds, illegal factory pollution, the Stewart family's foundations are rotten to the core. Stewart-owned supermarket brands trended online, every corporate partner issuing public statements suspending all collaboration, and the family's stock prices plummeting the next morning. Melanie's social media accounts flooded with thousands of critical comments. She attempted mass deletions, yet screenshots had already spread across every corner of the web. The next dawn, reporters crowded outside the iron gates of the Stewart Manor. The metal doors remained locked tight, every window curtain drawn shut, and the crash of shattered furniture echoed faintly from within the estate walls. Inside the manor, Cecilia Stewart sat in her second-floor parlor surrounded by broken porcelain teacups, dark tea stains seeping into an expensive Persian carpet. She wore rumpled nightwear, her silver hair loose and unkempt, unrecognizable as the polished, poised matriarch from the courtroom only days prior. Melanie stood trembling in the doorway, her face deathly pale. "Grandma, all our business partners have pulled out, and corporate cash flow has dried up completely. Get out of my sight. Grandma, please listen. I told you to leave." Cecilia hurled a silk throw pillow at her, voice cracking with rage. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't accepted that $300,000 transfer and left a paper trail, the court would never have uncovered my financial scheme." Melanie stumbled backward, her lips quivering, tears spilling down her cheeks as she spun around and slammed the door behind her. Cecilia sat alone amid the wreckage of her parlor, listening to the distant shouts of reporters outside the gates, slowly bending forward to bury her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook violently. After a long stretch, she sat upright and dialed the number of her most trusted senior lawyer. The call connected, yet the voice on the other end was cold and distant. "Miss Stewart, I am unable to take on your case at this time." The line went dead. Cecilia slowly lowered her phone, the distant noise of reporters echoing hollowly through the empty manor. She closed her eyes, sinking deep into the sofa like an old puppet with its strings cut loose. 5 days after the verdict, I took Sunny for her 1-month postnatal checkup, with Aaron accompanying me every step of the way, registering appointments, waiting in lines, holding the baby, collecting test reports, handling every task without hesitation. A nurse commented casually, "What a dedicated father," and I flushed slightly with embarrassment, yet Aaron did not correct her, bending down to tease the infant with a soft smile. Once the examination concluded, we sat together on a park bench in the hospital garden, golden ginkgo leaves carpeting the ground all around us, Sunny sound asleep in her stroller. Aaron suddenly broke the silence. Claire, there is something I never told you before. What is it? After Grandma separated us 5 years ago, I tracked you down. I found the rental apartment you'd been living in, planning to take you away with me. But you'd moved out the day before I arrived, leaving no forwarding address with the neighbors. I stared at him in shock. You came looking for me? He pulled a crumpled old envelope from the inner pocket of his suit jacket. I tore it open to reveal a 5-year-old one-way airline ticket to the southern city, dated the day after I moved out. Tucked inside was a handwritten note in his handwriting. Claire, wait for me. I will come take you away. I've kept this ticket all these years, his voice low and heavy. Grandma told me you'd left voluntarily with the stipend money, so I thought you'd chosen to walk away from us. I stopped searching, convinced I had no right to force you to stay. I only learned later that you never received any of the letters I mailed to you. Grandma intercepted every single one before they could reach your hands. My fingers tightened around the faded ticket, cold against my skin. 5 long years apart. I'd believed he'd abandoned me, that he'd bought into every fabricated rumor just like everyone else. Yet he had come for me, written letters to me, all those lost chances buried beneath the passage of time, yet always real. Why didn't you tell me sooner? The past cannot be changed no matter how much we talk about it. He cut me off gently, his tone steady. I did not want you to think I was making excuses for myself. I only needed you to know I never stopped caring about you. A ginkgo leaf drifted onto the canopy of the baby stroller. I brushed the leaf away, falling silent for a long moment before speaking softly. Is this ticket still valid? He blinked in surprise. I mean, all the pain of the past is behind us now. Will you still walk the rest of the road with me? He gazed at me, late autumn sunlight gilding my thin face, faint dark circles lingering beneath my eyes, yet my gaze bright, as if a long-extinguished flame had reignited within me. He covered my hand clutching the ticket with his own. I will. After Cecilia lost her hold on power, Melanie became the target of universal condemnation. Business partners withdrew all investments, collateral family members demanded a full audit of the estate, and internal corporate investigations were launched. The once beloved golden granddaughter of the Stewart family had become a toxic liability no one dared associate with. Wealthy socialites who'd once vied for her company refused to answer her calls, and the Stewart family legal counsel delivered a cold warning. Ms. Melanie, I suggest you retain personal legal representation immediately. With nowhere left to turn, Melanie resorted to one final desperate act. She hired private investigators to stake out my apartment, secretly filming Aaron and me going about our daily lives, him leaving the apartment late at night with rumpled collars, me standing on the balcony holding Sunny. All footage captured ordinary, harmless moments, yet she edited and spliced the clips together to publish a slanderous article titled, Aaron Spends Nights at Single Mother's Apartment, the Infant's True Paternity Called Into Question. She hired the last remaining small marketing account willing to publish the hit piece overnight. This time, public opinion turned completely against her. 2 consenting adults living together, what's the scandal? The baby's father caring for his newborn daughter is perfectly normal. Has Melanie lost her mind with all these fabricated rumors? Does she not realize she's the public villain now? The article was live for less than 2 hours before the comments section overflowed with criticism. Aaron's legal team immediately issued a formal defamation and privacy violation lawsuit against Melanie. Melanie collapsed into hysterical sobs alone in her empty apartment, scrolling through endless hateful comments online. She dialed Cecilia's number, yet the call ended after a single ring. She called her parents, but the lines went unanswered. She curled up on her sofa, knees pulled to her chest, weeping uncontrollably as cold wind seeped through the window cracks, chilling her to the bone. A distant memory surfaced unbidden. When I still lived in the Stewart Manor as a teenager, she'd watched me from a second-floor window feeding crumbs to a stray cat I'd hidden in the garden after Grandma scolded it. Back then, she'd thought me foolish for wasting kindness on a stray animal. Now alone in her empty flat, she found herself envying that cat. At least the cat had someone to feed it in secret. She possessed nothing at all. 10 days following the verdict, Margaret took action that shook the entire city. She asked Josie to connect her with the largest local evening newspaper, spending the life savings she'd accumulated over 70 years to purchase a full-page print advertisement. The content was simple, a handwritten open letter penned in her own script. I worked for the Stewart family for 15 years. Cecilia Stewart ordered me to tell everyone she sent Claire $300,000 each month, yet I never once saw Claire receive a single cent. She threatened to fire me if I spoke the truth, and carried out that threat when I refused to comply. I hid this diary for 6 years, waiting for the day I could prove that young woman told no lies. Beneath the letter ran a black and white photograph of Margaret holding the diary, alongside a signed legal affidavit notarized at the newspaper office. The day the newspaper hit stands, the entire city buzzed with discussion. No marketing teams, no calculated spin, just an elderly housemaid spending her life's savings to print a single letter, solely to clear a young woman's name dragged through the mud for 5 years. The post went viral across every social media platform, the top comment holding only 5 short words: "Thank you, Grandma Margaret." I was breastfeeding Sonny that morning when Josie burst into the kitchen waving the newspaper, too overcome with emotion to speak coherently. "Claire, look at this." I read every line slowly, word by word. Halfway through the letter, I handed Sonny to Josie, turning to face the wall as my shoulders trembled silently. I did not cry aloud, yet tears spilled onto the newspaper, blurring the grey ink in faint wet smudges. That afternoon, I took Sonny to visit Margaret in the neighboring city. The second the door opened, I bowed deeply at a 90-degree angle before her. "Grandma Margaret, thank you for everything." She stared at me in surprise, reaching out to pull me upright, her rough palm patting the back of my hand firmly. "Silly child, this old woman could only do so little. As long as you thrive and raise your baby well, that is all the repayment I need." Sonny wriggled in my arms, stretching out a tiny chubby hand to grasp Margaret's finger, grinning wide with no teeth. Margaret gently held the baby's small palm, her eyes crinkling into warm slits. What a lovely little one, just as fair and soft as her mother was as a child. Golden sunset light streamed through the window, casting 3 overlapping shadows across the worn wooden floor. The small simple house filled with the warm aroma of brewed tea and roasted sweet potatoes. Meanwhile, Aaron's parallel investigation finally yielded decisive results. For decades, Cecilia Stewart had bullied and suppressed the Stewart family's collateral branches, leaving them holding mountains of evidence of illegal activity, fabricated financial records, tax evasion, unlawful seizure of shared family assets, and multiple historical bribery schemes. No one had dared come forward before. Cecilia had the power to ruin anyone who crossed her. Now that Cecilia's legal team and business partners had all abandoned her, the collateral relatives recognized their long-awaited chance. One Saturday morning, 7 representatives from the collateral Stewart branches filed a joint lawsuit with the court, demanding a full liquidation audit of all assets held under Cecilia Stewart's name and a formal settlement of shared family property ownership. The complaint spanned 40 pages, with 3 full cardboard boxes of supporting evidence attached. Cecilia received word of the lawsuit while sitting alone in the manor's empty parlor, a financial news segment dissecting the collapse of the Stewart supermarket empire playing on the television. She reached for the remote to change the channel, yet her hands shook too violently to grip it, the remote slipping to the floor and splitting open, batteries rolling beneath the sofa. She made no move to retrieve them, burying her face in her palms, her breathing heavy and ragged. A knock sounded at the front door. She ignored it. The knock came again, not the frantic pounding of reporters, 3 slow, deliberate raps. She walked to the entryway, peering through the peephole. Melanie stood outside, her face ashen, hair disheveled, eyes swollen red from crying, rolling a suitcase at her feet. Cecilia refused to open the door. Melanie waited on the doorstep for 5 full minutes, knocking repeatedly, before leaning her suitcase against the wall and sinking to the ground, burying her face in her knees. The iron manor gate remained locked shut. Eventually, the estate gardener took pity on her and quietly called a taxi to pick her up. She dragged her suitcase away from the Stewart manor as dusk fell, the massive iron gates staying closed behind her. The once brilliantly lit estate sat empty and desolate beneath the fading autumn sky. 1 month after the court verdict, Josie and I moved into a new 2-bedroom apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows flooding every room with sunlight. Aaron covered 6 months of rent up front, and I did not refuse, only promising to repay him gradually later. He smiled and brushed the offer aside without comment. On moving day, Josie bought 4 potted green vines, placing one on every windowsill. Sunny lay in her crib kicking her tiny legs and babbling happily. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor unpacking boxes, old clothes, a few books, my worn suitcase, and Margaret's diary copies. I placed the diary on the highest shelf of the bookcase, positioning the faded airline ticket beside it. All the sycamore trees outside had shed their leaves, bare branches stretching toward a pale grey sky. The first winter snow had yet to fall, yet a crisp chill hung in the air. I stepped forward to close the window slightly, turning to see Aaron kneeling beside the crib, extending a single finger for Sunny to clutch. She gripped his finger tightly, her face flushing pink, giggling out loud. Josie poked her head out of the kitchen. "We're having hot pot for dinner. Who's running downstairs to buy dipping sauce?" "I'll go," Aaron stood, brushing dust off his trousers, glancing at me. "You stay with the baby." I nodded. As he pulled on his coat and walked past me, he murmured quietly, "The sunlight's beautiful today." I glanced toward the window, thin clouds parted to reveal a wide stretch of golden sunlight, glinting off the glass of the opposite apartment building in tiny shimmers of light. I smiled faintly. "It really is." After Aaron left, Josie carried washed vegetables out of the kitchen, winking at me playfully. "Have you two fully made up now?" I avoided a direct answer, walking to the window to brush a finger through the warm sunlight filtering through the glass. "We're taking things slow." Sunny yawned widely in her crib, releasing her loose grip on her blanket. I crossed the room to rock the crib gently, humming an old forgotten lullaby I'd learned from the radio as a child, most of the lyrics lost to time, yet the soft, gentle melody still etched into my memory, warm as a wool winter blanket. Outside the window, the first snowflake drifted down through the air. The asset liquidation audit of the Stewart family dragged on for 2 full months. Multiple bank accounts registered under Cecilia Stewart were frozen, and the manor marked for full financial review. She was evicted from the estate she'd occupied for 40 years, forced to relocate to a tiny remote apartment on the outskirts of the city. Her neighbors were strangers, unaware the gaunt, silent white-haired woman had once been the most powerful socialite and business matriarch in the city. 1 week before Lunar New Year, I received an unsigned letter postmarked from the neighboring city. A faint sandalwood scent clung to the paper, the same incense Cecilia had burned constantly in her study for decades. The letter was short, her handwriting slanted and shaky, unrecognizable from the sharp, neat script she'd used all her life. "Claire, I have lost everything, completely and utterly. You demanded the truth I owed you, and I will give it to you plainly now. I never intended to send you a single cent of that $300,000 stipend from the very start. You chose a path I refused to allow, so I destroyed yours. I felt no remorse for my choices once, Yet now I finally admit, every single decision I made was irredeemably wrong. The court ordered me to issue a public apology, which I wrote in my previous letter to you. Yet there is one line I could not bring myself to put to paper back then. I am sorry. I have lived 70 years, and you are the first person I have ever uttered these words to. Raise your child well. I have transferred whatever minimal assets remain in my name to your account via my lawyer. This is no compensation, no amount of money could ever make amends for the harm I caused you. I simply do not wish to carry these unresolved debts with me to the end. Do not write back to me. I held the letter, standing motionless by the window for a long time. Josie walked over softly, asking, "Who sent it?" "Cecilia Stewart." Josie tensed instantly. Is she planning another trick? I shook my head, folding the letter back into its envelope. She has finished speaking her piece. Josie stared for a moment, choosing not to press further, patting my shoulder gently before returning to prepare dinner. I stored the letter on the top shelf beside Margaret's diary, closing the cabinet door and turning to see Sunny rolling over on her play mat, stretching out her chubby hands toward me. I bent down to lift her into my arms, pressing my forehead against her warm soft one, closing my eyes. Outside, the snow fell thicker and heavier. New Year's Eve brought heavy snowfall. Our small apartment hummed with warmth. Josie bustled around the kitchen wrapped in an old apron, simmering bone broth on the stove, steam fogging the windows. Aaron wore a second apron chopping dumpling filling clumsily, his cuts uneven in size, drawing laughter from Josie as she passed through the room. Your chopping skills mean you're only on garlic peeling duty from now on. He did not argue, setting down the knife to obediently peel garlic cloves. I sat on the living room sofa holding Sunny, the television playing the Lunar New Year gala. The baby was wrapped in a tiny red cotton jacket, round as a red lantern, stretching her small hands toward a bowl of oranges on the coffee table, whimpering when she could not reach them. Here, I peeled a segment of orange and held it to her lips. She bit down, her face scrunching tight at the sour taste, and everyone laughed out loud. A knock echoed at the door. I stood to open it, revealing Josie bundled in a thick down jacket carrying a large bag of fruit and a box of homemade egg tarts, her cheeks flushed red from the freezing cold outside. It's freezing out there. I slipped twice on the ice, and one of the tarts cracked. She kicked off her shoes and rushed into the living room, bursting into laughter at the sight of Aaron peeling garlic in an apron. If the press caught the big CEO like this, tomorrow's trending headlines would break the internet. Aaron lifted a peeled garlic clove blankly. Free advertising for my company, perfect. The whole room erupted in laughter. Josie took Sunny into her arms to tease her for a while, the baby grabbing onto her scarf and refusing to let go. She carried the final platter of food to the table. Dinner's ready. The table was small, stacked full of steaming dishes, crowded yet abundant. Aaron sat beside me, ladling a bowl of bone broth for me, then setting a tiny child-sized bowl beside my hand for Sunny. Josie lifted her glass of orange juice. Cheers, to Claire, to Sunny, to our messy, warm little new home. She raised her glass again. Cheers to everyone who stood by us, Grandma Margaret, Martha, Anne. Vivian, Aaron reminded her quietly. Right, Vivian. Josie nodded vigorously. Cheers to her for choosing to tell the truth. I lifted my mug of warm jujube tea, glancing at the 3 smiling faces surrounding the table, and my sleeping baby resting in my arms, my throat stinging with unshed tears. I forced a smile, clinking my mug against theirs. Cheers to our new life. Sparse distant firecrackers crackled outside the windows, as if the entire city celebrated on my behalf. Snowflakes stuck to the glass, melting into thin streaks of water running down the panes. Aaron leaned close to me amid the noisy chatter, speaking in a quiet murmur only I could hear. Will we celebrate New Year's Eve here again next year? I turned to meet his eyes, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Depends on how well you behave. He laughed, letting the question drop, picking a tender stewed pork rib and placing it in my bowl before turning back to tease Sonny. The snow fell heavier outside the window, wrapping our small apartment in quiet warmth. The first page of my new life turned gently that night, bound together by the laughter of everyone I loved. Spring arrived, bringing new growth everywhere. I named my daughter Sunny. Josie said the name was perfect, warm and bright sounding. When Sunny turned 4 months old, she learned to roll over unassisted. I recorded a short video of her and sent it to Josie, who replied with a string of crying emojis. She can roll over already. I haven't held her a second time yet. I texted back with a smile, come over this weekend to hold her all you want. Aaron's company grew steadily more successful. After the lawsuit, public opinion cast him as a principled, loyal man who stood by his old love and child, boosting his brand's public image tremendously. During a financial magazine interview, the reporter cautiously asked about his personal life. He paused for 2 seconds before answering simply, "Everything is getting better." Josie held up the interview clip on her phone for me to see, grinning widely. "Does that everything getting better include you?" I continued feeding Sunny her pureed fruit, the corners of my mouth lifting softly without a reply. Josie spotted my ears flushing pink regardless. News of the Stewart family's asset liquidation faded gradually from my daily life. I no longer read financial newspapers or scroll through updates about the Stewarts. If someone brought up the name, I only responded briefly, smoothly shifting the conversation to other topics. I found remote work as a copywriter, the income modest yet flexible enough to care for Sunny full-time. Josie landed a stable front desk position at a small local firm, stopping by every evening to hold Sunny for 10 minutes before removing her makeup. Every weekend, Josie came over to stay for meals,